Hey guys, welcome to this chat with Paul. So, I firstly want to just give you a little introduction on what it's about and what it's for. So, this little chat's a precursor to our Wealth of Wealth event that's coming up on the 13th and 14th of December. And what we go through is the context around a lot of what keeps us stuck in the same patterns, doesn't let us actually achieve the desired outcomes we want, and how majority of it isn't our fault. It's just the fact that we've been trained and developed in ways where the social system and the setting that we're a part of leads majority of us down this garden path, and to get different results than the most, you've got to find someone to either lead you down there well or go and do the digging yourself. So the big part is Paul's here to help us over the weekend to impart his wisdom that he's built over the last 30 years of being 40 flat broke as a potter to a very time free and time independent wealthy millionaire who chooses to live on a farm and do his own thing now. So that's the reason why I'm here and why Mitch and I have worked in with Paul to bring Paul up here to help share this progress and process and prowess with all of you that are keen to come along. Without anything else, let's get to it.
If people really aren't, dead set motivated to, protect themselves given any scenario, I just don't, I can't relate to that lack of drive. I can't relate to that lack of motivation. I can't even relate to that lack of curiosity.
Hmm.
And yet they're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars basically just having little experiences all the way through life. And none of them are ever sustainable, which is why they have to keep spending tens of thousands of dollars having these little peak experiences and whatever it is that they buy. But those peak experiences are called peak experiences because they don't last long.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually got to, keep on replenishing them. And that's what the whole, conditioning around money is to do, is that you've worked hard, you deserve reward. So go and buy yourself this reward. But that, it might, human beings are really interesting is that they can't maintain peak experiences.
Mm.
So they have to then externalize it in order to get another experience. And I say, okay, so something in the outside world is going to sort of, make me happy, which of course never really happens. They just supply little dopamine hits, and then you just got to keep on spending and spending and spending to get bigger dopamine hits.
Mm.
And, the trouble is that they're wasting tens of thousands of dollars, but that's not even the important thing, because you can always make tens of thousands of dollars back. But what you can't do is make time back.
Mm. So this is the underpinning of this is really about the quality of time moving from like a point forwards.
It's really difficult to explain to somebody who, what a sort of a qualitative life existence really is, and what it sort of encompasses. Because lots of people will, they feel okay with what they're doing. And sometimes they have a bit of a struggle, and sometimes they have a bit of a setback, and somebody have. But by and large, they're not that fussed about, do I want to really keep working for the next 40 years and then get to the end of it without any substantial sense of achievement, with any sense of protection or independence and for me that's a great disappointment. And one of the reasons why it's a great disappointment for me is because I've got the ability to teach people how not to do that. And it's an interesting thing having the ability to teach people how to not do that and how to actually, live a life that's so much more richer, not only in terms of finances, but in terms of the experiences, because you now don't have a whole bunch of stresses on you that are normally on people. You don't have the arguments, you don't have the worries, you don't have the concerns. Prices can go up, and who cares? You've reached a sustainable point, or an unbreakable point, as they call it. The sad thing for me is that not many people have the listening for it. So here I am at, kind of, at the use by end of my life. And, I don't know how many years, you've got, and nobody does, but, certainly when you're in your 70s, you start thinking, well, it can't be that much more. sort of thing. And so, there's a bit of urgency for me to sort of share what I know and what I've learned over those, 70 plus years to anybody that has the ears to appreciate, to listen to it. And, really it's only just a small investment of their time, and, throw in a few dollars, but they're going to spend the dollars anyway. So they may as well spend the dollars having, an opportunity to have the greatest financial breakthrough in terms of their thinking and their behavior than just buy another little peak experience, which, is going to dissipate within the next week or so.
And to really bring that down into layman's terms, so that as you mentioned before, it's like the peak experience is like, saving up for that weekend away, staying at the beach with the kids, you know, those consistent those little eggs that seem to keep us going, versus what you mentioned before on having the complete freedom to wake up and figure out it's like, hey, today would be a good day to go to the beach with the kids and be able to do that, without the restraints and the pressures and the I keep thinking of like the kind of the blinkers that a horse wears, where it's like, you've been stuck on the straight and narrow for so long, or I need to keep earning to keep getting these little things. It's like in my mind, it's like, what does the opposite side of that look like?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Mm,
If you've never been there, how do you know?
yeah.
So all you really can do is, keep following the pathway with what you call those blinkers on.
Mm,
And it's not even the holidays, it's not even down the beach. It's like, you buy a little bit of chocolate here and you have a nice little peak experience with the chocolate. You go and have a
true.
beer with your mates and you have a nice little, go to a barbie with your friends, you buy a new fishing reel. You go and spend a bigger fishing reel, buy a boat, buy a car, buy some clothes, nice pair of shoes, nice wristwatch, a nice, set of
Mm,
runners, whatever it is. They're all tiny little peak experiences, which people have been conditioned to have because the economy needs people to consume. The economy needs, in order for the economy to grow, the economy needs spenders. And the governments don't make the economy grow. And in fact, there's only about 20% of what a government does that causes or that assists any economy to actually grow. 80% comes from individual consumers and businesses. And so to grow an economy, consumers have to keep spending. And not only do they have to keep spending, they have to keep spending over their entire life. So they never are really encouraged to save and create wealth because the system doesn't actually, it doesn't benefit the system of, consumerism or capitalism or whatever you want to actually call it. And it's like, most people have ideas around, wealth, and most people have beliefs around wealth, and they're all, anybody's beliefs, they believe them to be true. That's why they call them a belief. Doesn't necessarily have to be factual, but people believe them to be true, and so they follow a certain set of beliefs and a certain set of ideas. But one of the questions I always ask, if you've never created wealth before, how would you actually know what to do? And the sad thing is that people follow the instructions of people who are themselves not wealthy, but they're well-meaning. Say, look, I think you should do this, and this is my advice to you, and I think you should do this, and this is my advice to you. And most of that stuff is coming from people who have a vested interest in what they put their money in. So in other words, they're being sold a product or, 10 or a dozen products. Now that benefits the persons that's doing the selling, and ultimately it advantages the big organizations that sit behind them. But does it actually advantage the individual? And so most people believe I mean, if you think about, there's three types of people: those who will never create wealth. I mean, they're not even going to, in the,
Mm,
wildest dreams, they're not even going to think about it. And that's okay. That's unfortunate, but I can't. There's nothing I can do to support those people. There's nothing I can do to educate them. There's nothing I can do to interest them. There's not even curiosity there, and they don't have the means or the drive or the motivation. And something else is going on in their life, and that's unfortunate. Then there's a second group of people that think that they're doing the right thing. And so they're following the pathway of conventional wisdom. So conventional wisdom says you should, borrow all of this money and get into a huge amount of debt and then spend, the next 20, 30 years, trying to pay it off and all of those sorts of things. And so they believe that they're doing the right thing because that's how they're being advised. That's, they're being told, or they're being told to put it into this or this or this or that. And so it hobbles along, at a snail's pace. And one of the sad things about that is that people are never taught how to do the numbers. And so, because they believe they're doing the right thing and they're kind of sort of okay, it's a bit of a struggle, it's a bit of a challenge. The sad thing for me is that, 20 years later, they'll get to the realization that their wealth ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall because they've been trained and conditioned to use money in this way. And it's actually for the betterment of all those people who are doing the training and the conditioning. It's not actually for their betterment. And we can see that generation after generation after generation. Once it's pointed out, once I show people the numbers, you can't unsee them. But nobody teaches people to do the numbers. And then there's that third group of people, and those people who really study money and how it moves through a society and what it means, and how it comes into existence, and how what sort of leverage or what sort of multipliers you can actually get on the money itself, and they actually end up creating wealth for themselves. And so we've got an absolute minority of people in group number 3. We've got the majority in group numbers 1 and 2, but group number 2 is kind of sort of really shrinking. They're falling more and more behind, and they're going into basically they give up, and they spend all their time spending on this reward, because they're being conditioned to spend on desire, and that's just a feeling. And so desire quickly runs out. I desire the next thing. I desire the next thing. I desire the next thing. I desire the next thing, whilst they believe that they're doing the right thing. But like I said, money is replaceable, but time is not. And so, that's the thing that I really want to get into people. Look, you don't actually have to take 20 years. I mean, I was dead flat broke, became wealthy 4 years after I started, and I started when I was 40. So, I was older than most people are that I talk to, and I did it quicker than most people ever do it now. That's not because I'm a super brain. It's not because I'm a highly trained person. Like I was a potter, so I was throwing around hunks of clay on a potter's wheel. But there is something that I discovered. There is that sort of key, understanding of numbers and money that says, aha, that's why most people who work and believe they're doing the right thing will never ever create wealth. They never get to that place of, I call it financial unbreakable. Lots of people talk about, financial freedom and financial independence and location freedom and, time freedom. And it's, again, they're just well-meaning people, but they never really, take those words or those concepts and pull them apart and ask, well, what does that actually mean? And when if you try and define freedom, it's really slippery. If you try and define financial independence, it really becomes quite a slippery little, it's like a bar of soap in a bathtub. You just grab it, and zip, it's gone out, zip, it's gone out, zip, it's gone out. So I say, look, forget about that because they're such abstract terms. You can't get, it's like trying to wrestle a column of smoke, said Paul Keating. Um, so I say, look, you want to actually become financially unbreakable. And what that means is that in any given set of circumstances, like negative set of circumstances that are beyond your control, and they do happen, such as like COVID, and how many businesses went bust, how many people went backwards simply because this unforeseen thing hit our shores, and then all sorts of institutions decided this is the way to treat it, and this is the way to prevent it from spreading, and all of those sorts of things. But the fact remains is lots and lots of people lost their livelihoods and lost their businesses, and where do they go? And you can think of things like, just now AI taking over people's jobs. At Amazon announcing 30,000 jobs at the banks. They're sort of, kicking people out. So you can have, wonderful careers, and all of a sudden they're gone. And then you get, all the other market forces like market crashes or wars or that sort of geopolitical sort of instability. So financially unbreakable is when the market forces are doing all the heavy lifting for you. And so your wealth is doubling uh, according to, what vehicles you're using simply by market forces. And unless you do something really, really stupid, the market forces will double your wealth, every well, there's a mathematical formula. You take your wealth returns, in other words, how much you're generating in returns, you divide that into 72, and the answer is how long a doubling cycle will take. So if you're generating 10%, above inflation, if you're generating 10%, take inflation off, that's 7%. So 7 divided into 72, that's how many years it'll take for you to double. If you're earning 50%, divide that into 72, the answer is how many years a doubling cycle will be. And once you actually get to a doubling cycle, that's the market forces doing the doubling. So, real estate, what's the average is 4%, or 6% if you want to press it. Take off, costs of inflation, and that's what, most people don't know the numbers. But even if you just used a raw 6%, then divide that into 72, that will be one doubling cycle, and that just takes too long.
So when you mentioned at the start of this chat about what's happening now versus what's coming, could you paint a little bit of a picture there? Because I know it's a trap for, I guess the untrained mind to be like, well, tomorrow's probably going to be like today.
Sure. If human beings are not anything, they're predictable. So that's one of the first observations. So you can go through and take any decade of your life, and there will be a great degree of accuracy in terms of knowing what you'll spend your money on during that decade. So, let's say the 20-year-olds to the 30-year-olds, they'll be spending their money differently than the 30-year-olds to the 40-year-olds, who will be spending their money differently than the 50-year-olds to the 60-year-olds, who will be spending their money differently than the 60-year-olds to the 70-year-olds, and beyond. So every decade is highly predictable. And not only is it highly predictable, then you're encouraged by, social engineering, social conditioning to actually maintain that process. So if you take one full cycle, let's say the average age is 80 years, and then a new cycle begins, that cycle will just be a repeat of the last 80 or 100-year cycle. So if you break it down into 20 years as a generation, as the generation moves through their life cycle, they know exactly where they'll spend the money and what will happen. And so there's lots and lots of work on generational cycles going back thousands and thousands of years, and the same pattern is always there. So then if you think about over 80 to 100 years, you've basically got 4 generations going through their life or their life cycles. So you have the 20-year-olds and the 40-year-olds and the 60-year-olds and the 80-year-olds, and so to speak. Now, those cycles themselves have a particular pattern. And the last pattern before the beginning of a new series of 4 is always a collapse of some description. So it's an economic collapse, it's a political collapse, it's a statehood collapse, it could be a combination of those things. And so here we are in one of these cycles, and this particular cycle has a name called the fourth turning. And so the fourth turning started in around about, 2008, maybe a couple of years before, and it's got 20 years to run. So we're nearing the end of that. And the end always comes with some sort of climax. Now, generally speaking, if we go back through, 3,000 years worth of history, we'll see that it generally will be an economic collapse disguised as a war. I mean, there will be a war, but really it's an economic collapse because of the irresponsibility of, the governing people who have mishandled the financial system, prior to that. So then they've got to hide it behind a war and then blame everything on the war. So we're in, really approaching that sort of climax where, everything pretty much takes a nosedive. And which again is why you want to be financially unbreakable before you get there, or at least on your way to becoming financially unbreakable. Because I think we've still got a few years left. And when I say a few years, anywhere between, I don't know, around about the next 5 or so. And you can go from zero to being quite wealthy within that 5-year period, but only if you really get your motivation and it becomes your central focus, and you stop believing what you think you believe is actually accurate. Because, like, society doesn't want you to be wealthy. It wants you to be a good consumer for all of your life. And so that's why only ever a few diverge from that pathway and end up creating wealth. And again, partially it's a knowledge, a little bit of knowledge, but it's actually not all knowledge. And if you think about the question that people ask is, well, how do I become wealthy? I don't know that that's actually the most useful question to ask. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not the most useful question to ask, because there are any amount of people, any amount of gurus on the planet that'll tell you exactly how to become wealthy. And you can actually go down to a bookshop, any bookshop, you can get online, you can buy, you can go down to YouTube. There's any amount of people there telling you how to become wealthy. You can read any amount of books. How do I become wealthy? How do I become a brilliant trader? How do I become, whatever? But none of them, when you really look at them, tell you, the individual, what the individual, needs to do in order to become wealthy. So partially it's an incorrect knowledge or the absence of knowledge, partially, but that's only about 10% of it. I reckon 90% has to do with behavior. So it's a retraining, a money retraining challenge, more than it is a knowledge acquisition challenge, because there's like any amount of knowledge available, and yet the stats don't change. So it's a money retraining behavioral challenge. Once I show people that, once I show them the numbers, once I actually teach them how to think about the numbers and then how to observe whether they are actually using the numbers in the most appropriate way for their, quote unquote financial future, then the rest is just behavior.
And behavior will change.
Yeah, so it's a behavioral retraining. So it's like,
Hmm.
you used to run a gym there. What's all that about? If you want to become healthy, it's all about behavior. If you want to become strong, it's all about behavior. A little bit of knowledge. Well, how do I actually build a muscle? How do I build these bigger biceps? But the rest of it's just training. If you don't do the training, you can't build the bicep, or whatever it is, like any amount of people know how to lose weight, but it's not a knowledge problem. They actually need to do the training. If you do the training and you've got reinforcement and you've got good support, and so what you did in the gym is give people really good support, a really good knowledge, but really what you did is keep them motivated to do the training. And as they did the training, they became fitter and stronger and healthier. Wealth is exactly the same. You need time, you need a vehicle. So, like a vehicle to become strong might be a series of barbells or a series of dumbbells or whatever, so some weights. And so we need to do some resistance training. exactly the same is wealth. Okay, so what's the most appropriate vehicle? Is there a vehicle that goes faster than do all vehicles that have the capacity to get you from A to B, do they all drive the same speed? And the answer is no. It's like all cars. Some cars have got a greater capacity for speed than other cars. Some vehicles have got a greater capacity for load than other vehicles. It's the same with wealth. Once you actually understand the vehicle and then the speed of that vehicle, and then you enact a set of behaviors and you get support on those behaviors so that you've got to do the training, and then the compounding effect through time is what will actually then determines the amount of doubling cycles you have. And so, um, my wealth doubles on an annual basis without me having to do anything. And that's not sort of bragging, but I don't have to do it because I already set it up. The market does the rest. I don't have to worry about it. I don't think about it. I don't look at it each day. It's just there and it's doing its thing.
Wouldn't it be amazing if life was just that simple?
Well, it is. That's the cosmic joke.
That's it in a
But we've all
nutshell,
been
isn't it?
conditioned to believe that it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just a farmer on a block of land. Um, it is. But once you understand that anything in the external world has been designed to trick you, and anything in the internal world is where, truth and reality lies. So the most important things to a human being are only found in the internal world. They're searched for in the external world because you've been made to believe that you can find them in the external world, but they're not. Independence is not in the external world. Freedom is not in the external world. Happiness is not in the external world.